Hello everybody. We are out here today, early March, David Louia's place, up here in Jackson County, near the Roane County line, and he's got some fairly young fruit trees. These are 2 or 3 years in the ground. Actually, the one that I'm standing beside, believe it or not, is 1 year in the ground. So really nice growth we've got here on the fruit trees, but what we're here to look at today is proper pruning, and especially for these young trees, getting them trained early on really set yourself up for success and a little bit less work down the road. So what we're trying to do with these trees at this age is get rid of some of the stuff that's growing not really the way we want it to grow. Maybe some stuff that's already gotten hit by a little bit of disease pressure or insect pressure. Try to get that stuff out so we've got a good healthy tree moving forward here. So I won't waste a lot of time. What I will do really quick here though is just introduce you to some of our favorite tools. Nice set of hand pruners. You want to get yourself a fairly heavy duty set. There's you can get pruners for $15, you can get pruners for $75 or more. Really honestly doesn't matter what price you pay, you're going to get a pretty decent set of pruners. The more expensive ones, sometimes you can get replacement parts. They may last a little longer, they may have warranties. The one thing that you will want to get on these pruners though is to make sure they're a bypass pruner. We don't like pruners that don't give you a nice clean cut through there. So you always want to make sure you've got bypass pruners, and you always want to make sure you keep them oiled, well lubricated, and cleaned up. Our other favorite set of tools here, and these look a little wild, but they've been well used, just a good set of loppers. Again, these come in a lot of different shapes, a lot of different sizes. These actually can cut limbs up to 2 inches thick. Now, you're gonna have to be a little bit stronger than I am probably to get through 2 inches, but this thing will actually fit around a 2-inch limb. Again, keeping it well lubricated. These things will last you almost a lifetime if you take care of them. The other thing that I want to mention too, particularly for folks that maybe have some older trees or trees that maybe in production last year you had some fire blight or things like that, just as a good management practice so we don't have cross-contamination from one tree to another. Carry yourself some Clorox wipes, bring you a can of Lysol spray, any sort of disinfectant. You can mix up a bleach solution and just carry it in a bucket, dip your tools, move on to the next tree. That'll kill any of those spores, particularly fire blight's a bad one. So we don't transfer fire blight from one tree to the next tree and you go from a small problem to a huge problem when something that takes 5 seconds could prevent that. So I did bring these along as we jump from tree to tree. We'll make sure to wipe everything down so we don't have any problems. So as we look here at this apple tree, automatically you start to notice some things. You notice it's getting fairly tall. What we want to look for is a good central leader. That is your main trunk going straight up that tree. Almost always the tree will sort of create its own at the nursery. They actually prune it, so you kind of get a central leader started, and really quickly you can tell that this limb right here is going to be your central leader. And so our focus from there is bringing it into a size that we can manage. Mr. Luia, his management plan for these trees are predominantly for wildlife, the fruit production to feed his wildlife out here, his deer, his turkeys, other critters. So we can deal with the trees being a little bit taller here because we're not going to be up in a step ladder. We're not going to be picking all these apples to put on our table. If it were something that we were looking to do a table apple type production, my personal preference is to keep it a little bit shorter, a little more bushier. That way I can manage everything from the ground I don't need to be on a lot of ladders. We're on a little bit of a slope here, so just from a safety perspective, and I'm scared to death of heights, so I don't necessarily want to be up in a lot of ladders, particularly on a hillside. So the first thing we want to do is probably bring this down just a little bit. The top of this tree is probably at about pushing 10 feet right now. So keeping it down for a tree this age, down in that 8 foot or so ballpark, is kind of where we want to be. So we're just going to reach up in here kind of as far as we can. And that again gives us some ideas of about how big we want to manage this tree. And we just lift that guy right off. And so that's where we want really the top of our tree to be right now, is at about that height right there. From there, we just kind of start working our way down. You can also start at the bottom and work your way up. It doesn't really matter necessarily from here. We're really just going to try to set this tree up for success, for strength, for stability. So as I'm standing in here, I don't like to have a lot of limbs below my waist. Reason being, if I'm going to be mowing around it, if I'm going to be in here fiddling with it, I don't want stuff banging around my legs. I don't want, you know, anything like that. So as we look here at kind of all this mess down here, we're going to get rid of all of it. Again, it's not useful when the top of this bush is out. This is never going to see the light of day, so we're not going to get really any fruit production to speak of. And generally it's just in the way. And so what we want to do when we prune is, you can really see on these trees a very pronounced branch collar here where the limb connects to the main trunk. And we just want to get as close to that branch collar as we can without really getting into the branch collar. Reason being, if we get inside of that branch collar, it starts to really affect that cambium layer or the growing layer of the tree. So you can even err a little bit on the side of caution there, and you're better to leave a little bit of a stub sometimes than being too close in to where you're going to affect that growth. But again, you know, we're just going to start working our way down. We're looking for limbs like this even as we move our way up. So these limbs that are bent, they're crooked, that's never going to produce an apple. And if it does, it's going to break the limb out. You know, we're just going to be really fighting limbs like this all the way through the life of the tree. So for sake of time and not to bore everybody with the video, I'll take these out afterwards. So imagine all of this mess at the bottom is gone. So now what we want to do is we look up here in the top. There's 3 or 4 main things that we want to do. We want to make sure as we're building these scaffolds, so these limbs that are coming out, these main limbs, we call them scaffolds. We really want to look at kind of that north, south, east, and west mentality. So we want 4, maybe 5. On a semi-dwarf tree, you can go to about 6 main scaffold branches. I wouldn't do much more than that. And we want them kind of going in all directions. So again, thinking that north, south, east, and west, you don't want 2. So if we add 6, you don't want 2 right side by side going in the same direction. So like this guy and this guy, little guy's got to go. They're too close together. They're going in the same direction. So we're going to sacrifice him because this one is really growing nice. That's a nice limb. So sometimes, and this sounds crazy, but sometimes it's easier if you're really having trouble looking from the side, lay down underneath your tree and look straight up. And that gives you sometimes some sight to say, okay, yeah, that one's going the right way, that one's, and so you can kind of visualize it a little bit better. After you've done it enough times, you can start to kind of stand to the side here and make some good decisions. So again, here's our central leader. You know, again, we're not growing super straight up. That's something that could always be staked and maybe straighten that tree up a little bit, but you're not in such a bad shape that's going to be a problem. So again, we're going to start right here with this guy. This is a good strong limb. What we've got here, this one that's growing straight up, again, it's trying to be that central leader, but really what we've got is new growth. And this grew last year. This whole piece grew in 1 year. This is a water sprout. And so we want to come in and we want to get rid of that. All that's going to do is be competition against our central leader. You can also see just how much space that opened up, just in one simple cut, how much that opened up. So again, back to our shaping. This is a nice limb here. This again is about as low as I want to go though, but this is a nice bottom limb. We've got about 6 inches between this one and this one, so we've got good spacing there. So I'm going to keep this guy. So here's our first 2 scaffolds that we're looking at. We kind of want one that's going to go that way for us. And this one I think can do it. This one may be one that may need to look at maybe doing some spreading or some staking to kind of lay it down a little bit so it doesn't try to compete with our central leader. But I think this could be our 3rd limb. And then from there, you know, we don't have a lot of good scaffold branches right now, but the more pruning that we do, the more buds are going to break and the more limbs are going to come out. And so we're able then to start with maybe 3 good limbs, might find a 4th by the time we're finished here. If we don't, that's fine. We prune it, we leave it. Next year we come back and we do it all again until we have a tree shape the way we want it. The other thing that I would, that you want to look at in a pruning scenario, yes, we want to choose our scaffold branches, but the other piece, and you see it very well right here, see these limbs that are crossing, rubbing into each other, you know, just really tied up. This is going to be nothing but a headache if they stay. And so any of our small branches that are rubbing against each other, that are crossing, if there's any sort of insect or disease damage, even to some extent you're starting to see some dead material there, get rid of it. It doesn't matter, honestly, on that kind of stuff. If it's the middle of August and it hasn't rained for 3 weeks, you can get rid of that kind of stuff. We don't want to do heavy pruning then. But as we look, we see this stuff that's crossing. We're going to get rid of it, because that's going to be a really good place as we get that damage. Insects love to find damaged wood because that's a really good entry point for them. Diseases the same way, that's a good entry point for them to get in. As we look at this piece, it's growing backwards into the tree. So we're looking at things that are growing down, things that are growing back into the tree. What we want to have when we're finished, and this is a very old adage, but one that sadly is very true. When we're finished pruning an apple tree, when we're finished pruning a peach tree, and you've done it right, you can throw a cat through it and nothing, and no legs or nothing ever touches a limb. What that allows us is we have good airflow moving through. So imagine this tree in full leaf. If we didn't do these pruning cuts, we have a lot of leaves in here, there's no airflow getting through. So every time the dew sets, there's diseases land on those leaves. If we don't get that dew dried off first of the morning, as soon as the sun hits it, as soon as the breeze sits on it, then we're going to have disease problems. So the more airflow we can get moving through here, the happier your tree is going to be. And so that's really, for young trees, that's pruning in a nutshell. We're looking to create somewhere between 3 and 6 scaffold branches. We're looking to get rid of things that are crossing, things that are dead, things that are diseased, things that are dying or weak looking. We want to get rid of stuff on the bottom, so our root suckers and any water sprouts that we see that are just growing straight up and down, we want to get rid of. And so from there, literally what we do on our scaffold branches is we're just going to kind of come back on them a little bit, and we're just going to nip them back here to bud. And so what that does is it's going to force a lot more bud breakdown on this end, so we're going to get more of those lateral side branches that come off, because that's where our fruit's going to come from on that 2-year-old wood. And so that, like I said, that's pruning in a nutshell. Peaches we prune slightly different as far as a different style goes, but we're still accomplishing the same things. We want 3 to 4 scaffold branches. You know, we want to shorten it down. We want to get rid of stuff on the bottom. We want to get rid of stuff that's growing backwards, that's diseased, that's dying. So we're accomplishing the same goals, even though we're going to use an open center concept instead of that central leader that we look at for an apple tree. But like I said, that's pruning in a nutshell, and I hope you guys learned something. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us, leave us a comment here on the video, and we'll get those answered for you. So have a good day, everybody.